Hello everyone and welcome back to my garden. So it is a beautiful morning. I've been out here most of the morning because it's, well, nice and cool. It's going to be another hot one today. So just going around doing a little pruning, a little watering before the sun comes out. And I've moved most of my garden to the back area of the property because we've been dealing with a wind issue. So today I want to talk about some of the things, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are going through this with some extreme temperatures or weather conditions. So I'll talk about where my garden's at, what I'm doing with it, and maybe some of the things I'm doing will help you as well. Now, I don't have the rain and humidity issues that some of the, Northeast are having. I'm in Southern California, so I have, of course, the heat, and I have wind. I have some wicked wind. If you're in this region, sometimes we talk about the Santa Anas blowing in, but we have a coastal breeze on top of that. So we're about 15 miles from the coast, and I love that coastal breeze, but that breeze turns into 15, 20 mile an hour winds, sometimes 30 mile an hour winds, sometimes more. And last season, I thought I could handle it. I did everything I could, and it actually went pretty good until I got hit with a wicked windstorm, which kind of took a few plants down. So I'm going to talk about some of the things that we're doing. One thing that I did for the wind is I moved my beds. Now, I know that not everyone can do that. So if you've watched previous videos, you know that we're in transition. We're looking for land. And so I didn't know if I was going to be here this season, so I did a lot of my planting in containers, and I have some movable raised beds. So I decided to move all of the raised beds in the back, and I thought that was the easiest solution. So they're all on wheels, so we took down some of the trellising, and I moved them back here. Now, so that's one way, but I know a lot of people don't have that. And if you can move a bed, it might not be until next season, right? You struggle through a season and then you reconfigure your beds later. The second way to help with the wind issue is trellising. And that helped me a lot last season. So I had some arch trellises. This is a cucumber trellis. I have a tomato cages. I also have here next to me, and I'll show it to you, is my ladder trellis. So the trellising is good because it creates a structure, a foundation for the plants, and as they grow up and kind of weave through it, then they can withstand that wind a little bit more. Now with my arched trellis, it did really well at first, but that wind really started, especially my peas, they were kind of growing over the top and not weaved in enough. So they just blew right off of it. So if you do have a wind issue, I recommend that you kind of weave your plants through it, so that way it's a little easier for them. So that is one way to do it. Now, what can happen, and just as a precaution, is the plants that are, so on this side, if this is the wind side, these plants are going to take quite a hit. And that's what's been happening, is that wind keeps beating at my plants, and the plants are stunted. The plants are more susceptible because they're stressed to pests and disease. So that can be an issue. So you may have some plants that, say, on this side are kind of, you're sacrificing a little bit, and on the other side they're protecting those other plants. Now let me show you a second way to kind of mitigate your wind, okay? Okay, so here is a close-up of the cucumber trellis I was talking about and how you can weave those plants through there. Now this bed was really struggling when it was up front. This little watermelon plant was having a hard time. It's finally coming back. My chamomile was struggling. It was literally blowing the little petals off of the flowers. My cucumbers, that cucumber plant down there, you can see the edges of one leaf. That's what all the leaves look like when it was up front. I have a volunteer tomato plant. That bell pepper plant gave me a couple purple beauty bell peppers, but again, the wind was just hitting it so hard. Now, so the first thing I said you could do is you could do your trellises. The second thing is to plant a plant like this Swiss chard that's going to block some of your other plants from the wind. And this created a little bit of a shield, but not enough. Not enough at all. Now, over here, I have a pretty good tomato cage. It's not as sturdy as, say, this tomato cage, which is very sturdy. But it was sturdy enough that it helped my tomatoes in the wind. But by planting this big, beautiful brassica, that actually blocked these plants much better. So this cucumber plant here was doing horribly and still is struggling. It's getting better, but when plants are in distress, they're just so prone. You can see there's powdery mildew on here, and it was just getting beat up so much. But this plant here really protected the tomatoes, the bell pepper. There's a cucumber plant in there. This cucumber plant was on the edge, so it wasn't protected as well. There was another cucumber plant, well, this one here, that was on the edge that was having a hard time. But a plant like this that fully blocks the wind, and it did fine with the wind. So I was willing to sacrifice that plant, but I really didn't have to. Now, another way to deal with wind and heat is shade cloth. So we have things covered quite a bit here. And that's partially because, well, with the extreme heat, I have a lot more critters that are trying to get my little garden. But I have a lot of plants that are struggling a bit, so this does double duty. Now, right here, I'm just using some bamboo poles. And that's because I needed to pull this up a little bit. I've actually got corn in here. And you can see in the beginning, I was using these, and I also have some wire that I can cut into hoops and put hoops up. But they weren't tall enough, right? So my corn is starting to get taller. So I got some bamboo and I secured my shade cloth to it. So it does two things. It helps with the wind, and then it also helps with the sun exposure. Now, this little area here brings in a lot of wind. So what I may have to do is build almost a privacy screen or another trellising system right there, because this corn can absolutely take a beating during the wind. Now, this structure back here, I have no problem with wind, and that's because this, and I'm holding everything down, and I'll show you. These are those boxes I built, or really screens, because each one is a panel that I can put together. Now, I use some hardware cloth for this, so those openings are pretty small. And even without that row cover on there, it still cuts down the wind really, really well. And then when I add that row cover or shade cloth, I cut down sun and I cut down wind. So of course this is going to be a little more intensive. It's going to take some building and cost would be a bit higher. But this is another way that I've dealt with wind. And if you saw those screens, the video, and we'll put the link in here, I said I was going to put hinges on here. So each one of these panels is separate. So I can just build little boxes or big boxes. And when I want to store them, they store flat. But we didn't use hinges. It didn't work. So I'll show you what we did instead. Okay, so I've opened this up so you can see that what we did instead of those hinges is we used dowels. And you can see here, we have dowels on the side of these. So now, all I do is push them together, which has worked out really, really good. A lot of these plants need to be shaded right now. They're a bit delicate for the sun, and I'm hoping like that bok choy and this mustard here, celery, Japanese spinach, keeping it covered will help it get through this heat and into my fall season. And it's also protected from the wind. Now, yes, it's a little makeshift, but it's working so far, so I'm pretty happy about it. All right, so that is what is happening in my garden. And honestly, you know, I've lost a few plants from the heat and the wind, but overall I've been able to save quite a few plants, right? And that's part of what gardening is. You're not going to win every battle. You just want to win a good portion of them. So just to recap, for wind, I think some of the options, trellising, I love trellising for a lot of reasons. You can grow a lot more. I think pulling, you know, your plants up off the soil allows you to mitigate some of your pest and disease issues. I think trellising is good for wind and for sun because you can block other plants, you can set up row covers or shade cloth. So I love trellising. The one thing I didn't mention is definitely making sure that you direct those plants, but use some of your tie downs with them. So I think that was my big mistake last season. I had that beautiful arch and I really didn't weave them in and I didn't tie them down enough. So that wind just really took them off. So using a trellis is one. Second was building a plant that blocks the wind. I'm getting distracted because that is the biggest bumblebee I have ever seen. I gotta show you that. Oh my gosh, do you see how big that guy is? He's huge. That is absolutely the coolest thing. I just love the garden. Okay, sorry about that, but that was the coolest bumblebee ever. Not ever, but it was super cool, and he was big and black. That was incredible. All right, so back to what you can do. So our recap, you can do your trellising system. He's back, he left, and the bumblebee is back. All right, trellising system, that will help you not only with wind, it'll help you with sun because you can cover it. Second thing is to plant right, for that wind. So something that's big, bushy, can either handle the wind or is a sacrifice plant. So you're going to sacrifice it for the other plants, but it'll block that wind. So that's number 2. Number 3 for me is the row cover or shade cloth. I think that that can really help you with the wind as well as the sun. Now you just need to make sure that you have a good foundation for that shade cloth or row cover. So you can use hoops. Right now I have it secured on bamboo, but the bamboo I need to make sure is secure against my raised bed. So I've got it latched to the wood, or I'm using rocks to hold down the shade cloth. So, and I've got little clips. I have clips that are made just for hoops. I have clips that are made to go around the bamboo like you saw. But you just really need to have a strong hold on that because it can fly pretty easily, and mine has. And the last thing I showed you were my little protection cages. So I have some cages to keep critters out. It actually helps me with wind, and it helps me with sun because I can cover it. I used shade cloth on it, and well, right now it has row cover on it. But the mesh material is a hardware cloth. We did a video about it, so we'll link below to the video. And then I was able to move my beds. So I was able to move the beds mid-season because they're on wheels or they're containers, and I just needed to get it done. For those of you who can't move your beds, you know, you might plan out next season, and maybe you can pull them up and move them next season. But if you can't, I've given you quite a few different ways that you can try and protect your beds. And finally, the privacy walls, you could build something, and I would make it out of wood, so it's very sturdy, but you could build something that isn't necessarily a trellis system, though it could be, but more is a block, right, for your wind. So that would be my final recommendation. So, like I said before, so far so good. I've had some wins, some losses. I would love to be growing more and more and more. I am planting fall now, so I'm planting a bit more for my fall crops. So I'll talk about that next time I see you. So thanks so much again for joining me. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button so people find it, and don't forget the notification bell so you don't miss any great content. Thanks again for joining me, and I will see you again soon. Happy gardening!